Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Huawei MediaPad M5, which is a version with a 10.5-inch display. It's 2560 by 1600 pixel display, quad speakers, front and rear cameras, fingerprint sensor, USB Type-C port down here on the side, and this version has a Kirin 960 processor, 4 gigs of RAM, and 64 gigs of storage. It's a relatively premium device, sells for about $360, this version does. There's a cheaper version with a smaller 8.4-inch display that sells for about $320, and there's a more expensive version that has a slightly different processor and pen support that sells for about $450. The basic idea here, though, is that there's not a lot of companies making sort of iPad-style tablets in terms of price and quality and features, other than, say, Samsung maybe and a couple of others. And you can often find cheap Android tablets for as little as $50. So what do you get if you get a more expensive model? Well, you get better speakers, you get a better screen. Those come in handy when you're, doing things like reading periodicals, newspapers, and other things. We've got pictures and text look pretty good, and everything's pretty responsive. Multitasking works pretty well too. So we could switch and go to reading a book if we wanted to. Or, say, open up video. Yeah, we've got pretty good viewing angles. Everything looks nice from different viewpoints. Let's go ahead and brighten that screen a little bit. Turn the volume on so you can hear. Brings up this utility for PC Manager, and it allows you to check your hardware, manage drivers. Now, the tablet also has this fingerprint sensor, which is more than just a way to log into the device. It also can be used for navigation. So, for instance, I can use it with a single tap to press back, or I can press and hold to go home. I can also swipe it and go to recent applications and scroll through different things. See Netflix, open up Perfect Viewer here, open up a comic book, get to reading, go back to recents, and go back to the video if we decide we want to see what's going on there. So in order to choose between those different options, you can go into the settings, scroll down to System, go to Navigation. It's probably a little easier to see if I switch to this mode. And System and Navigation. And you have a choice of using the sort of standard virtual navigation bar with back, home, and recents, or we can use the off-screen navigation buttons, and that gives us a little bit more screen real estate here. So whatever it is that you're looking at, you have that extra space because there's no bar down there at the bottom. So again, recents, home, or back, which doesn't do much from this view, but back. Another thing that's kind of nice about having a large screen tablet is that the keyboard is kind of large enough for 10-finger typing. Now, you don't get the same kind of tactile feedback that you would have with a physical keyboard, but you might find that you don't necessarily even need a keyboard cover or case with this sort of device. It's pretty thin and light. It's about 0.3 inches and about 1.1 pounds. It's distributed pretty evenly, so I have no problem holding it for a fairly lengthy period of time. So you notice that I was looking at books and comics, and I've spent a couple of hours reading on this device, and overall I find it to be a pretty pleasant experience. It's mostly a media consumption device the way that I use tablets, but you might be able to get a little bit of work done. It does come with WPS Office, and you can also install other applications for doing different sorts of things. A couple of software features that are kind of interesting here is there is a desktop mode, which, when enabled, gives you this sort of Windows XP-like environment. So we've got a app launcher that looks familiar to anybody who's used Windows in the past. We can get notifications and other things here, and we can exit that mode and go back to a more standard user interface. We can also go into settings and choose apps and app twin, and there's this option to double an application. I'll show you what that means in a second here. So if we go, take a look, there's a single Facebook icon there, right? But if we go back to settings, create a twin app, now there's two Facebooks, and that allows you to log into the same application twice using two different user accounts if you wanted to do something like that. It's kind of a nice feature to have if you have multiple people using the tablet and you don't want to create separate profiles for everybody, or if you have multiple Facebook accounts for whatever reason. It only works with a couple of apps out of the box. It seems to recognize Facebook and Messenger, and that's it. There are instructions online that'll show you how to use it with different applications if you wanted to do that. Anyways, Huawei loaned me this tablet to test out, and rather than do a complete detailed review, I just wanted to show you some of the highlights. It's pretty nice, and if you think that it's worth spending a little bit extra to get something a little bit nicer than, say, an entry-level tablet with a low-resolution screen and a slower processor, I think it's a pretty good device that should hopefully last a couple of years. Can't really say much about what kind of software updates you'll get over time or anything else, but out of the box, the experience is pretty good. And in terms of battery life, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that you'll get around 10 hours or more, depending on how you use it. I've used it for days at a time without plugging it in, watching videos, playing some light games, and doing a lot of reading on it. And overall, it's a pretty nice device. Again, this isn't necessarily a detailed review, it's more of a hands-on, but since I happen to have this and the cheaper, smaller version and the more expensive version with the same size screen are both going to be available starting on June 12th in the United States, I figured I would do a little bit of a hands-on video. Thanks again to Huawei for loaning me this to review, along with the MateBook X Pro, and you can find more details about the X Pro laptop in our separate YouTube video and at liliputing.com. So, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing and the Huawei MediaPad M5 with a 10.8-inch display, quad speakers, USB Type-C, volume, and power buttons. There is a SIM card slot here, but the version sold in the US, I believe, is going to be Wi-Fi only. So that is the MediaPad M5 Pro with a 10.8-inch display. One thing I will say about the gestures is it sort of takes a little bit longer than I would like sometimes to get to the home button, but it is nice having the extra screen space down here at the bottom. I also guess I didn't show you how quickly we can turn it on by pressing the fingerprint sensor. So that's the lock screen, but you can bypass it just by tapping that button pretty quickly. So that works really nicely. It's just the press and hold to get it home that I find a little bit problematic. Everything else is pretty zippy.